Welcome to WYCD Wicked. Your old pal Jake, and tonight we're talking about a mixed bag. We've got Maxine Waters being interviewed by Ayman, gonna take a whack at this, Moyeldin, and they're talking about a subject I'm glad to hear talked about on national news, national cable news, and that is federal police reform and the desperate need for it. In addition, a billionaire is using a PAC newly created specifically to fight progressives, teaming up with centrist Democrats and good old-fashioned GOP in order to stop the true enemy of the people who like to put their boots on people's necks, progressives. Then what the OGL victory means for anybody interested in fighting big corporations. That is, of course, the Wizards of the Coast open gaming license controversy. Wizards has thrown in the towel. They have surrendered utterly, and the organization in this community should be a template followed by us. Let's get right to it. Maxine Waters was recently interviewed by Ayman Moyeldin on MSNBC, discussing the desperate need for federal police reforms. That is, federal laws aimed at reforming police. Let's have a look.
We begin this hour with the breaking news on the tragic death of 29-year-old Tyre Nichols at the hands of police in Memphis, Tennessee. There are demonstrations again tonight in cities across the nation after Friday's release of 4 harrowing videos of the deadly police assault. This comes as the Memphis Police Department announced it has permanently deactivated its so-called Scorpion unit. That's the group all 5 of the officers involved in Tyre Nichols' death were members of. And those officers have already been fired by the police department, and they are now charged with his murder. It is an important first step towards justice for Nichols and his family, but that is just it. It is a first step.
Context as well. Those officers were fired. There was no further talk from the community leaders. There was no further talk from the police in that community about what else they're going to do. Glad to see that Scorpion unit is no longer in existence. So they'll find another tough-sounding acronym in order to give police an insane amount of power. Not acceptable. Let's hear what Maxine has to say.
We have to ask, why does this keep happening? George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Philando Castile, Eric Garner, Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, Daunte Wright, Andre Hill. They all died at the hands of police, leading to protest after protest, and yet nothing has been done at the federal level to reform policing in America. President Biden has vowed to sign into law a comprehensive and meaningful police reform bill while he is in office. But the odds of passing anything significant, let alone comprehensive, seems vanishingly small.
Got to get through the House and the Senate. House is controlled by a bunch of white nationalists.
Remember Republican Senator Tim Scott from South Carolina? Back in 2021, he and Democratic Senator Cory Booker began working on a police reform bill, but that effort ultimately fell apart. Now, there appear to be no
blocked in part by Kamala Harris's actions, but also, most notably, and never forget these names, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Forget if he talks about it in here, but those two are responsible for killing the end of the filibuster, rather, for saving the filibuster. The filibuster is what made it impossible to pass any substantive laws when the Democrats controlled the House. You can thank Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema for that.
no major efforts in Congress to reform policing. Why not? Well, Democrats no longer control the House, and the new Republican majority seems much more interested in investigating Hunter Biden and the FBI than any real governance. But it wasn't always that way. Remember, for the first 2 years of the Biden White House, Democrats actually had control of both chambers of Congress. So why didn't they seize the opportunity and get anything done? You can thank these two.
There we go.
Senators Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. It was Sinema and Manchin who dug in their heels to block filibuster reform. And that meant to get anything done, Democrats had to secure 60 votes instead of a simple 50-vote majority. Preserving the filibuster effectively killed a wide range of Democratic legislative priorities, including police reform. And look, here's Sinema and Manchin high-fiving each other just last week at Davos over their efforts to block filibuster reform.
Disgusting.
Great job, guys. Well done. But here's the thing. They weren't just high-fiving the failure of filibuster reform. They were high-fiving the failure of police reform. And that's the consequence they own tonight. Joining me now is California Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Congresswoman, thank you so much.
I do want to get to, I very much want to hear what she has to say. But first and foremost, yeah, we have to make them own that. This is what you can do. One of the things you can do is have a good memory. With the sheer weight of scandals that are a direct result of corruption in the United States, it can be difficult. I understand. If you are having trouble keeping track of who you should be angry with and what you should do about it, go big to small. Largely, how do we feel about the last 2 years with Democrats? Did we get a significant change to the minimum wage? No, we did not. Did we get police reform? No, we did not. All of the legislative goals that were there for Democrats were hampered by the filibuster in one way or another. Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin are the reason we couldn't get anything done on that front. So, you don't have to remember every single Sinema and Manchin scandal, of which there are a ton. Once you hit the amount of information that is enough for you to say, I do not want this person in Congress in any form. I certainly do not want them in the Democratic Party. When I donate to Democrats, I want 0% of that to go to helping them. Once you get to that point, you don't have to keep going. You don't have to keep digging for more. Don't exhaust yourself, I would even say, with every little thing. The broad strokes are, these people inhibited some of the most important legislation that could have been passed. Now we know. Let's not forget about it in 6 months.
For being here. I want to start with your reaction to the death of Tyre Nichols at the hands of Memphis police. What do you make of it?
Well, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity and for giving exposure to what has happened with the brutal beating and killing of Tyre Nichols. I'm grieving along with his family and friends. I'm a Black mom. And when I hear that he was asking them, please, don't beat me, he called for his mom the same way George Floyd did. Us Black moms and Black grandmothers, we feel this pain very deeply. I don't have any really great hopes for the fact that we're going to be able to pass police reform. It is racism in its purest form. How can you not be outraged by the killings of human beings when you see that they have been beaten, the chokehold has been used, a knee has been placed on George Floyd's neck. When you find that going back to Rodney King, the vicious beatings that took place, how difficult it was to try and get justice then. And so it's a struggle and it's a fight. And they want us to be quiet. But I'm angry, as many of us are, and I don't care whether it's a white cop or a black cop. If they are brutally beating and targeting and killing young black and brown men and some women, we've got to stay out there. We've got to protest. We've got to challenge them. We've got to say to the police associations that we're going to stop elected officials from taking your money so that they will not act against you when you are basically protecting these road cops. So we've got to do all of this work. And some people don't like it when I say stay on the street, protest. Yes, and I'll say it again as I said it years ago. No justice, no peace.
Okay. So I'm very much pleased to hear that being aired on national television. What can we do about it? Let's talk about lessons learned from George Floyd. Because I was delighted at first with those protests. What happened, though? Got all that energy out there. Had all that that momentum. Marched all the way to Washington. There's pictures where the camera lens is filled with angry faces. Wasn't a very efficient use of that energy, though. Because what were they calling for? Even the phrase that they tried, the organizers tried to sort of plan around, I suppose. Defund the police. What does that actually mean? You ask a dozen people there at those protests what they meant when they held up a sign that said defund the police, you'd get a dozen different answers. A lot of them I like. A lot of them I support. But if you were out there protesting, it has to be for something specific if it has a hope in hell of accomplishing anything. Can't just go out there and say conditions are bad, make conditions better. Because that, you're talking to politicians. These are people who specialize in doing nothing and packaging it in 100 different ways to make it seem like they've been busy all day. Every politician is that guy at your office that doesn't do any real work, and everybody knows it. But every time you look over, he's tip, 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 tip typing. That's a politician's entire career, by and large. My point is we have to be clear and simple with what we're requesting. To that, what you can do, you can write your representative. Each one of us is responsible for what comes out of the mouth of the representative of our district. The representative of our district does not rely on the votes of somebody in a different state, like the president does. They don't even rely on the votes of somebody in a different part of your state, like your senator does, like your governor does. Your district representative has to please you and the other people in your district. That is why I so strongly recommend that you contact them when it comes to issues like this. Don't contact them with a bunch of things because they won't even read the whole message. Contact them with one thing. This is what I recommend. Write your representative and tell them to endorse a federal database of police misconduct. It is not a Band-Aid that will fix all the policing problems in the United States. What it will do It will make it so that if there is a racist cop out there and he gets fired from Department A, he cannot simply go to Department B, apply, and get hired. Having the gall to put his experience as a racist cop in Department A on his resume. No. A federal police misconduct database will stop bad cops from being recirculated, just like bad priests are. It's not the only thing we need to do. It is, however, the first thing we need to do. It is clear the mood is correct in the country to get it passed now. Is it likely to pass? No, because we have the House of Representatives to deal with now. But make Republicans say no. Make Republicans have to take a vote on that. Make Republicans make it crystal clear where they are in relation to these issues. Right now they can say Tim Scott tried to pass a bill. No. Make the vote happen. Have your representative publicly endorse this measure. A federal police misconduct database. There's even a script in the description, along with a link to finding your representative if you believe that is a good idea. That will put, assuming you contact them, assuming 3 or 4 other people do as well, that will put those words in the mouth of somebody who gets national attention. You want to talk about multiplying your efforts? That's a great way to do it. Let's have a look at some of the comments. Ariel says, LOL, I'm still stuck on Iran-Contra. Oh, a woman after my own heart. Yes, indeed. There is a reason that this is permanently in my palette of graphics to go to. Because those 2 cats behind me, Ronald Reagan and his, at the time, Vice President, George H.W. Bush, they got away with it. And their fall guy got to then be the head of the NRA, Oliver North. Ridiculous. If there's any good to be derived from that American embarrassment, it should be that we now know, or we can point to it and say, look, these problems have always been here. The time has simply arrived to deal with them, to end this corruption. Well, a good way to know if you're on the right side is to have a look at who's fighting you. If you want to know who was the good guys in World War II, you were either fighting an alliance of countries that didn't want to get invaded, or the Nazis. So, these days, when I see a PAC being funded by a billionaire who donates almost exclusively, not entirely, but almost exclusively to the GOP, and that PAC it's designed only to attack progressives, makes me think I might be on the right side there, and you likely are as well. Let's have a look at John Iadarola poking fun at this particular individual.
There are many obstacles standing between progressives and getting elected to Congress, but not all of them are exactly what they might at first seem to be. We're gonna give you an example, and it's called the Moderate PAC. It's a PAC, they raise money. And in this case, the way that it's being presented is this. Axios reported last week that the PAC, the Moderate PAC, is planning to raise $20 million to fight off Democratic primary challengers in 2024 and, quote, scare off progressive groups like Justice Democrats that have backed several successful primary challengers and helped create a growing squad of progressive lawmakers in Congress. So look, already at face value, that's not great. It's a group designed to stop the Democratic Party from ever becoming nearly as progressive as its voters are. So that's bad. But it's actually way worse than that. And when Axios did this reporting, they would just leave you with the idea that this is like another, I don't know, blue dog or centrist Democratic group or something like that. But it's actually worse. The group's only consultant is Greg Schultz, Joe Biden's former campaign manager. So, having someone so closely tied to the current president who seems to have as his only goal in life stopping progressives from getting elected, that would be bad. But
How many times do I say that centrists are more interested in fighting progressives than they are in fighting with the GOP? That is because progressives threaten money that centrists rely on. Centrists don't tend to get a ton of grassroots donors. They're certainly better than the GOP, but that's not where their funding comes from. Their funding comes from the same places that the GOP's does. If you wonder why we always seem to have the same problems in America, or why there's that run-on joke of all politicians seeming to be the same person, it's because they're all bribed by the same people.
there's some other things that you need to understand as well. And in this case, we have to give a lot of credit to Kayla Lacey at The Intercept, who dug into this group. Not only who founded it, who
well done,
works it,
Kayla.
but also, and most importantly, who's actually funding this effort to control what sort of Democrats make it through the primary process. So first, the founder and workers. We have Ty Strong, the moderate PAC president and founder, worked for a decade as a financial and business management analyst at Booz Allen Hamilton before joining a smaller financial firm in Pennsylvania back in 2020 that closed abruptly the following year.
Booz Allen Hamilton, that's a name.
Joined the moderate PAC in October of 2021. Mary Sue Strong is the chief financial officer at ProSync Technology Group, a defense contractor that provides IT services to the federal government.
Jesus.
So already you're off to a great start. You've got some financial people tied in with Wall Street. You have defense contractors. You've got some Joe Biden former people. And here is how they would word their mission for this group. Ty Strong wrote this Wall Street Journal op-ed and said, he criticized what he called a Democratic circular firing squad and progressive purity tests that have threatened the political careers of centrist Democrats like Mark Kelly.
How often have you heard that purity test thing? Who tends to say it? Right-wingers tend to say that, like, oh, you want this purity test, and if somebody's not perfect, then you hate them. That's a great way of saying I can't pass a purity test. Yeah, you know what? If you're going to get my vote, if you're going to get my donations, if you're going to be the representative for what I believe in, yeah, you're going to pass a purity test. Yeah. Certainly in the primaries. In fact, that is the point of primaries. And if you happen to be listening to this and you don't tend to vote in primaries, let me tell you. They say you get 1 vote per election. It's not true. You get 2. Because of the system we use, if you don't vote in primaries, you are giving up half of your political power. Use it. We have both a 2-party and a 4-party system. And we simply run elections like a tournament. So make sure your fighter doesn't get disqualified in the early rounds. Vote in the primaries.
And Kirsten Sinema in Arizona. If Democrats in purple states can't find a way to pivot back to the center and avoid death by circular progressive firing squad.
One more thing about, that's a hell of a quote. The theory in purple states is that you need to go middle of the road. Look, we got to learn from our enemies. What did Donald Trump show us? You get more votes if you play to your base. It's because it's hard to turn out voters in America. We're so used to the system not working for us that a lot of us simply don't vote. I don't think it's a good strategy to play to the center in any state. Play to the side that you want to vote for you. Encourage a lot of people to come out and vote for you. You are not going to encourage a lot of young kids to come out and vote for a centrist Democrat. But in a purple state, you need every blue vote that's there. That's simple.
Wrote, get ready for Republican control of both houses of Congress in 2023. He is not interested in a circular firing squad. He is interested in turning those guns outward towards any outsiders who might run for office. In any event, he also said that moderate House Democrats often face primary challenges from the far left while also facing competitive general elections.
Good.
We've seen the Republican Party cannibalize its moderate faction, replicating this on the
Wait a minute. So right there, the guy's revealing his purposes. He's like, "Oh, well, this could go bad two ways. They've got that primary challenge where it could end in disaster, and then they've got the general election." Yeah, that's exactly what I just told you, except phrased like it's a bad thing. That's a good thing. If they don't win in the primary, means they were unlikely to win in the general.
Democratic side would be a big mistake. So here's the thing, all of that is largely what you might expect. It is a group masquerading as very moderate, when really it's there to advance the interests of defense contractors, Wall Street, and all of that. But can you think of a way that it could get any worse? What if all of its funding didn't even come from bad Democrats, but came from Republicans? And in this case, it is true. Since last year, the moderate PAC has raised just over $1 million, all of it from a single donor, billionaire and co-founder of affiliate investment firm Jeff Yass.
Okay, so right there. First of all, link in the description. This is a longer video. All of it's entertaining. I would recommend you watch it, if only for funsies. But that highlights how screwed our current campaign finance system is. Financed entirely by one person. What are the laws in the United States? Well, there's a limit to how much a rich man can give to a political campaign, isn't there? Unless that same rich man starts a PAC, in which case he can give them an infinite amount of money. He simply has to first give it to the PAC. It's as simple as this. If he hands the money to the candidate he wants to win directly, and it's $1 million, that's illegal. But if he says, okay, I'm going to put on this hat right here. I'm going to put on these. Now I'm a super PAC. Now here's $1 million. Same person. Given the same amount of money. Just a different name for it. That's all that is. We got to get rid of them altogether. In fact, I'll go so far as to say we need to get big money out of politics. Let me tell you where else this goes awry. I'll be merciful and get poor John I to roll off the screen there. Let me tell you where else this goes awry. Without even forming the PAC, that same billionaire could buy an infinite amount of commercials in support of the candidate they want to win. In other words, rich people get more say in politics than you or me. Wealthy people are allowed to bribe politicians. That is what this is. And I gotta say, I'm delighted that they're singling out progressives here and saying, well, gosh, they're the biggest threat to me, the rich guy. Good. Now you know whose side you should be on. The progressives. Whoever that rich guy doesn't like is your friend. So what can you do? This one's a layup. In terms of identifying what to do, it's going to be hard to get done, but how do we get things accomplished? Consistent pressure. That is how we get things accomplished. We need to pass a constitutional amendment. There is a group called Citizens Take Action. Unfortunately, those two cases, those two examples I cited, the rich person giving an infinite amount of money to a PAC, or buying an infinite amount of campaign funds or campaign commercials for a politician. Those were decided in Supreme Court cases, disastrous Supreme Court cases, unjust Supreme Court cases, which means we have to do the only thing that will allow us to trump a Supreme Court. God, he ruined that word, didn't he? That will allow us to beat a Supreme Court case in terms of our decision, in terms of what we are allowed to legislate in this country. There is links in the description. You can sign up to volunteer for Citizens Take Action, or simply contact your representative, tell them you want to hear them publicly endorse the Restore Democracy Amendment. This amendment would make it possible. It wouldn't even do it by itself. It would simply make it possible once again in America to ban corporations from bribing politicians. If you don't want a Democratic Party, which is doing the bidding of big oil or big whatever the hell, over what you need, if you don't want Republicans getting, Republicans are going to sell their souls for a nickel, but if you don't want the majority of politicians in this country funded by major corporations that don't have your interests in mind, Citizens Take Action and the Restore Our Democracy Amendment is the way to go. You can make it happen. Remember, each of us is responsible for our own representative. You contact yours, I'll contact mine. Tell them you want them to support the Restore. Can't remember if it's Our Democracy or Democracy Amendment, but it is in the description right now. You can go check me on that. The Restore Democracy Amendment. Ooh. So, we do have a little slice of good news. If you were watching a couple of weeks ago, you might have heard us talk about the open gaming license. Even if you're not a gamer, that was relevant at the time, and now it is relevant to everybody. And now the reason it's relevant is abundantly clear. It was relevant at the time because it was such a good example of how corporations talk when they're lying, when they have something they know that you will not want them to do, that they're going to try to get away with doing anyway. Unfortunately for Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Dungeons & Dragons, who relied on something called an open gaming license, or rather who offered something called an open gaming license for 20 years, their fans, the people who buy their products, are notorious for getting into the weeds and reading closely the rules. So when Wizards announced that they were ending their open gaming license, which had allowed independent content producers to use Dungeons & Dragons without worrying, like on their streams, on their shows, whatever, without worrying about paying them for it, when they tried to undo that, there was an uproar. The reason being, a lot of people are only into Dungeons & Dragons because first they saw some charming little show somewhere that helped popularize it. Well, the backlash was huge. The makers of another game, tabletop game called Pathfinder, said they were starting their own version of an open gaming license. They called it the ORC, O-R-C. D&D Beyond, which is Dungeons & Dragons' subscription-based service, they lost tons and tons of subscribers, and therefore tons and tons of revenue. They were hemorrhaging money. Here is D&D Shorts talking about it.
We won. It's 2 minutes past 9 on January 27th, 2023. And 54 minutes ago, Wizards of the Coast released a tweet on the D&D Beyond account, which said, "Over the past few weeks, you, the community, have made your voices heard, and we've listened. OGL 1.0A will remain untouched, and the entire SRD 5.1 is now available under a Creative Commons license. You choose which you prefer to use." This is
beautiful.
Oh my god. You know what a big deal this is. Wizards of the Coast are a billion-dollar company. They tried to do something terrible, and we as a community stepped up to the plate and we punched them out.
Okay, so when he's saying you know what a big deal this is, that was for his audience, which plays, it's a D&D channel. So if you're not aware, what they essentially said was takesies, backsies, mulligan. Essentially, they're not going through with the plan they had attempted to go through. We're going to say it again later because repetition is important, or rather consistency in repetition is important. But let me just be clear. When he said we did it, we got what we wanted, it's because they were crystal clear about what they wanted from the beginning. There wasn't one group calling for the preserving of the original open gaming license. There wasn't another group saying, we want slight modifications made. It was flat out, we are going to leave if this goes through. And then when the company had a document leak that said what they were going to try to do was release the thing later, essentially. But still the same, just later when people forgot about it. Then there was a mass exodus. And then they tried to release another version of the gaming license. And they said, what do you think about this? And the mass exodus continued because all the bad stuff was still in there. We're going to go into detail in a moment, but it's a moment of triumph. Let's let this guy celebrate. Also, it's about to be pretty informative.
We punched them out. We won. There is so much to celebrate here. This is a victory for the entire community. It would have been absolutely impossible without the entire community coming together as one voice and making their demands heard. Wizards did everything they could. They tried to hide it, then they ignored it, then they denied it, and then we won. What we also know is we put enough pressure on them financially to force them to back off. They've seen the crazy success that Paizo have had selling 8 months worth of books in 2 weeks, and they've freaked out and they've realized literally they cannot hold on to this. The fact that they're putting the whole SRD 5.1 means that most people won't even need an OGL anymore, and once it's in Creative Commons, they really can't walk that one back. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, I haven't had a chance to speak to the lawyers yet, but I think that once it's there, it's not even theirs anymore. So 5e content will forever be protected, and they can't.
So when he's saying 5e, he's referring to Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. All that stuff, set it aside. Don't get lost in the weeds. It comes down to this. When he was talking about Paizo, that was the person I was referring to earlier, the company I was referring to earlier, the other tabletop game maker. But set all those details aside. It breaks down to this. The community heard about a thing that they didn't like. In fact, that video is an absolute delight to listen to, if only because of the victory. But that's more or less the end of the general relevance right there. The link is in the description if you're interested. But I want to stick on this because, man, we can learn. So to recap what he said, D&D has thrown in the towel. Rather, Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Dungeons & Dragons, have thrown in the towel utterly. And the chain of events went like this. The community heard about it. Let's make some comparisons as we go. So imagine that community was all of America, for example. In this case, the D&D community heard about it. They objected. It was all over social media. It was all the D&D shorts, every channel that covers Dungeons & Dragons put in their 2 cents. A lot of them started their videos with, you guys have been talking about the OGL a ton. You've been telling me to make videos. Okay, so here it is. The OGL update, blah, blah, blah. That's your representative right there. So all those content creators that were following it, speaking out, yada, yada, think of that like your representative. Then what happened? A competitor came in and started sweeping up all of the business that D&D was doing. They took a firm stance against it. They used it to advertise. I happen to know a bit about Paizo. They are an extremely left-leaning company. I believe they were genuine, but in their reasons for doing what they did, I believe they would have done it if they wouldn't have made another dime. But it can't be denied what he just said. They sold 8 months worth of product in a couple of weeks. In the analogy, then, that's the primaries. Going over it again, they heard about it like we just heard about Tyre Nichols. Their representatives, as YouTubers in that case, and as our literal representatives in this case, spoke about it. Then the competition started getting the money. Now that's represented by primary votes. We heard about Tyre Nichols. Theoretically, we're going to talk to our representatives. We're going to send them emails. We're going to shoot them phone calls. Got to watch my wording there. Good Lord. We're going to make phone calls. Then the results need to be reflected in the primaries. Anybody who doesn't get on board with federal police reform, primary them. Make that a big deal. Wherever you are, make it a big deal. How does it end? Wizards of the Coast throws in the towel. They could not sustain the losses. They knew it. They knew there was even worse than any one scandal. There was a cultural change happening. They were losing their crown as the kings of tabletop. If you think of tabletop games, you probably first think of Dungeons & Dragons. In 10 years, that may not be so, because I'll tell you, Paizo, which makes the game Pathfinder, is the new favorite of that community. Similarly, in this analogy to America, the Democrats are Wizards of the Coast. The old guard of all, Democrats, Republicans, whatever, they're Wizards of the Coast. They need to throw in the towel because they got to get hurt so bad in the primaries that they simply cannot afford not to respond to these demands. Use this as a playbook. I'm sure I'll do another video where I'm more concise, but that's important to see. That is a direct cause and effect, by the way, with very quick action that happened right before our eyes. And now is the time. Now is the time to start doing these actions. In this analogy, we need your representative talking about federal legislation to start a database of police misconduct. We need them to do that now. Why? Because 2024 is coming up. They are forming what their campaigns are going to be about. And whether they agree to talk about it or refuse to talk about it, they're going to have to commit. And that will tell you how you should vote in the primaries. You don't have to worry about the country going to hell because some crazy Trumpist got elected in the primaries. That's what the primaries are for. Get your political views as narrowly as represented as possible with your vote. Don't compromise in the primaries. If you got to compromise, yeah, you do that later in the general vote. That's the vote blue no matter who. I'm very much a believer in that. But the primaries, no. No, that's where you get a chance to show the Democratic Party which way they ought to go. If we get a very blue couple of primary wins in 24, expect all Democrats thereafter to shift left. That's the goal here. I sound angry, but I'm tickled. I'm delighted by the results of the open gaming license controversy. What about 3.5? I'm not sure what you're asking. It's my preferred version of Dungeons and Dragons. I'll tell you that. By a country mile. I'm not sure how it's represented. I think that is still under the old open gaming license, but I couldn't say with a certainty. I will say from here on out, I am a Pathfinder player. I announced it on air, so now I gotta. But just on general principle, I like the company Paizo, and in terms of tabletop games, it's just I like to not learn a bunch of new systems all the time. So I stick to something long term. And hey, talking about good long term investments, progressives are the way to go. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. I have had a wonderful time talking with you about the goings-on of the day. I will, of course, be back tomorrow and every day for the foreseeable future. This is WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. See you next time.
Love, I've been up since like 3 a.m. I don't hear the hate, what y'all say ain't in. All I know is go, all I know is grind. I'm on your head, all I know is climb. Just know I'm different. If I see the target, just know I'm gonna hit it. I don't know the fake, just know I live it. Anything I say, just know I'm in it. I know the ops and they lightweight. I'm in the zone and I might stay. Yeah, I'm on in the right way. Check the scoreboard, look who I play. They say sky the limit, that's too low for us. We showing up in the nosebleeds of the galaxy. When you think of great, look, it's actually me. Yeah, it's actually me. Might just pull up on some nonsense. Ain't no limits on my conscience. I don't know, you don't know, we don't know. Stop us. I don't think nothing can stop us. Ain't none of y'all about to stop us. Might just pull up on some nonsense. Ain't no limits on my conscience. I don't know, you don't know, we don't know. Stop us. I don't think nothing can stop us. Ain't none of y'all about to stop us.